Hi everyone, welcome at Daha Yaxsi studio. I would like to welcome Rashad, Shirin, and Nargis Kassenova for the first time in our show. We decided to change a little bit format. So Nargis, you are participating at the pioneering version of our program where we will have two moderators, so two hosts of the show. It will be Rashad and me. Rashad was guest before, but now he's already, also the host. And I want to present my friend Rashad. He is independent researcher and is doing a lot of things, but we'll cut it and not put today the attention on him, but on you. Nargis Kassenova is the director of the program on Central Asia at the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard University. Rashad, I suggest you start with the questions.
Yes, Nargis, welcome to our program already. So there will be more hosts in this program. I think progressively there will be more hosts than guests in the program. I'm afraid in the future. Yeah, I mean.
Yes, exactly. Because maybe one day Nargis will be also co-host. That is the idea.
Okay. So you are a potential host, co-host in the future.
I'll be happy to.
Cool. Very good. We've known with Nargis each other for many years now. And our last communication, I think, was when I was doing the assessment of the referendum of Kazakh referendum with the OSCE. We had a mission in Astana, and we had talked with different experts from Kazakhstan, from Central Asia, on the situation in Central Asia, and particularly with its connection to the events happening after February 22. Yeah, the full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine, and I think this was very interesting for me personally to discover in Kazakhstan particularly this some sort of, I don't know how to put it, was a tension or anxiety related to the Russian invasion. I mean, we've talked and discussed about this even before the war in Ukraine. Kazakhstan's some sort of apprehension of the Russian Federation, its long, almost unprotected border with Russia. It was always the part of discussion during the conferences, during forums. But this recent development for the last 2 years, and I mean, it was somehow visible. It was becoming some more tangible. This anxiety, this tension existing in Kazakhstan. So maybe we can start with this, focusing on Kazakhstan, but also it would be interesting to see the perception of maybe other Central Asian states and countries, maybe if it's possible, briefly, what is happening there, and of course with focus on Kazakhstan. Maybe let's start with this. Yeah.
Well, Rashad, first, spot on. There had been anxiety in Kazakhstan, right, prior to February 2022, and it just basically increased and got intensified after the invasion. So there's clearly before and after February, but there were before February. And there was the Russia-Georgia war in 2008, which was, scary because Russia supported the separatist statelets, right? And then there was the annexation of Crimea in 2014 when there was a direct land grab by Russia. So these developments, obviously, they sounded an alarm. They raised concern in Astana and in other Central Asian capitals. But of course, what happened in February, that was on a different scale. And now we find ourselves in a new context. Russia basically undermined the post-Soviet security and political order, and it's basically decided to revise the borders, deny the sovereignty of a fellow post-Soviet state, which is very scary. And you mentioned that Kazakhstan shares this pretty much unprotected border, 7,000-kilometer border with Russia, and also very importantly, Russia broke up with the West, and now it is openly trying to undermine the so-called liberal world order, which is good for smaller states like ours. We like international order, right? We like international law, and well, Azerbaijan appeals to international law, right? That's just so important for us, right? The principles of territorial integrity, inviolability of borders. So now we have Russia that kind of had complete disregard of these principles, and it's our biggest neighbor. It has much more power and capacity than we do, and it is also not only it's a challenge, but it's also a provider of regional security. Yeah, so we find ourselves, not only Kazakhstan but Central Asian states, in a very difficult situation. So I would say not so much we changed, but the context changed. Now we have to change in response to this changing context.
Mm-hmm. Nargis, maybe it's, as a question, it might sound very simple, but let's see if we can find an answer to this. What might possibly happen? What is the worst case scenario? Why this tension that I could feel in Kazakhstan? It was different. I mean, you do not really feel it, let's say, in the Caucasus. Although Caucasus countries in the South Caucasus, they're even smaller, they're even perhaps potentially less protected from a possible invasion, let's say, from Russia. But in Kazakhstan, there was some sort of different feeling about this. What might go very wrong with Kazakhstan in terms of Russia?
Also, Russia, to add to your question, we have been observing, Nargis, very threatening statements of some Russian politicians in regard to Kazakhstan, undermining that there was no such country, no history, the narrative that, and the comparing that the Kazakhstan will be next after Ukraine. So how is Kazakhstan state and society are reacting to this and maybe preparing themselves for possible threat coming from north?
Well, Kazakhstan is particularly worried because we share similarities with Ukraine. Well, parts of Ukraine, or the whole Ukraine, is considered by Russian policymakers, some Russian policymakers, but importantly by Putin himself and people around him as kind of part of the historical Russia, right? And Russia is entitled to Ukraine in this or that form. Maybe not, it doesn't have to become part of territorial Russia, but it belongs to Russia. Yeah, even if it is de jure and independent state, right? And parts of Kazakhstan are considered by some as part of the historical Russia, and here, it all started in the early 90s, right? You probably remember that famous essay by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was saying, okay, Kazakhs, their lands are actually somewhere in the south, right? That's where, you know, they live in a compact way, but northern eastern Kazakhstan, that's part of the historical Russia. So these are our lands. They should become part of Russia, and the rest they can do whatever they want, you know. And that's different from, you know, from the situation with other Central Asian republics. So we do share the border, and the you know, parts of Kazakhstan are kind of looked at as part of the historical Russia by some people in Russia, and that's a very different situation. Yeah, that's a very different situation, and there has always been concern. Yeah, if you look at the rhetoric, of course, we are strategic partners, and, you know, kind of we love each other. You know, I mean, Kazakhstan and Russia, we do things together. We form the customs union together. We are members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. There is a plethora of, you know, strategic partnership agreements and this kind of stuff. But there was all at the back of the mind. There was always this concern, and that's why Kazakhstan was trying to change the demographic composition in the north of the country, well. That's one of the reasons why the capital was moved to the center from the south, from Almaty to Astana, to kind of help with this push, demographic push. That's why, you know, millions of ethnic Kazakhs were invited back to Kazakhstan and asked to live in these areas, basically. Well, in the early 1990s, there were pretty tough negotiations with the Yeltsin team on the kind of on what the Cossacks do in Kazakhstan, what the Cossacks do on the Russian side, on the border, whether they should be engaged in the protection of the Russian border. And Cossacks played a, you know, crucial role in the colonization of Central Asia by Russia. Yeah, there were also negotiations what the Russian Orthodox Church would do in the country, and our leadership managed to convince Yeltsin and his team not to push and not to support the separatist forces in Kazakhstan. That was done in a very skillful way, I should say, but we never relaxed. Yeah, I would say Kazakhstan never relaxed, kind of knowing that Russia can do things. But I guess in February we're all shocked because Russia did something most of us didn't expect.
Right. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nargis. It's very interesting. It's also very interesting to compare the potentials of Russian, let's say, hard power versus soft power in relation.
What do you mean by soft power? Define soft power.
Soft power. Yeah, that's a very interesting term. I mean, all sorts of means, including cultural, economic, language, influence through the media, for instance. Yeah, the social media, traditional media, etc. All sorts of hegemonic influences, if we may define it like this. Yeah.
Operas, films.
Soap operas, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, to what extent this can be, in a way, politicized? Because so far it's not really, yeah. Like it's more about entertainment, culture, but we have this news segment, and people watch TVs, Russian TVs on a large scale. I mean, again, if we compare two regions, South Caucasus and Central Asian Kazakhstan, the influence of media, for instance.
It's such a broad range because, you know, okay, let me start with soft power. If you look at the concept developed by Joseph Nye, it's very different from what Russia is doing, right? So basically, he was talking about the kind of the vibrant culture, civil society, and that makes
Values
the
and
country. Yeah. And also there is the political layer. So there is this cultural, societal layer, right, where it's just so attractive that others, tune in and they kind of absorb these values and norms and whatnot. But also there is the political layer where the country kind of defines the agenda, and that's closer to what you kind of mean,
right.
talking about the hegemony, right? So there are elements of that, of course, because we were socialized together, we share cultural references, the Russian language is used, and kind of it's a very versatile language, giving access to many things. The level of infotainment is much higher in in Russia, so people do tune in. But of course, there is a difference between kind of Russian soap operas. People watch them, like the harm is kind of minimal, right? And news in Russia, where it's actually shaping, people's kind of
Worldview.
political views, and kind of there you have manipulations, you have weaponization, and can be part of the hybrid warfare, right?
Right.
So it's very different from soap operas, right?
Yes.
Or just
Why I mentioned this
or
because
reading Pushkin or whatever. Yeah.
in another country, post-Soviet country, which I'm not going to name, it was a very interesting, similar situation. But the people I talked to, local experts, they basically mentioned that there is actually a very short or small step between this infotainment and weaponization of this. So it's kind of, I mean, there was this fear or apprehension, anxiety again, that it could easily, be turned into something else. This media or soap opera influence can be politicized very easily. But the second, I completely agree with you in terms of shaping the worldviews, because the agenda that is promoted by the media, by these social networks, I think it already kind of shapes something.
I think it's wrong and counterproductive to define all the Russian language content as kind of this slippery slope to, to kind of becoming, a victim of Russian propaganda and,
Okay.
Russian puppet and whatnot. I think it's a very complex situation. We have plenty of Russian speakers. I'm a Russian speaker. Yeah. And Russian content varies, right? It's there are all kinds of actors and with different narratives, different discourses. So, I mean, I think it would be wrong to say that everything produced in Russia, is kind of part of this Putin's narrative.
Sure.
Or kind of helps to promote Putin's narrative. So I think kind of a more nuanced approach is
Because there is also alternative Russian content, yeah, like
exactly. Yes, yeah,
all sorts of, yeah,
right. And plus, it will be very difficult to substitute it. In places in Central Asia, especially in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, it will be very difficult to substitute, but also in Uzbekistan and, Tajikistan. We've been part of this cultural space for so long, Imagine like you ban everything, or you put a stigma on the Russian content. What's next, right?
yeah.
What can you offer? But I do agree that kind of the limits on on how much propaganda we allow, kind of that's a big challenge. That's a big challenge because you kind of, on the one hand, I don't think that the kind of the authorities, they like what Channel 24 or like the Russian propaganda channels are showing, but at the same time, how do you kind of ban them without upsetting Russia? Because we kind of need to maintain friendly relations with the neighbor. But that's a separate discussion. But I don't know if we return to your original question on soft power. I think the kind of, and these scenarios, possible scenarios, I think that's the likeliest scenario. And actually we see elements of it already. Yeah. Kind of the pressure is growing on the countries, particularly in Kazakhstan now, because Kazakhstan is seen as unfriendly, or doing unfriendly gestures. And you see it kind of, Karaganov says it on a, on a regular basis now, and, something, right. We need to develop relations with friendly Central Asian countries, and Kazakhstan in a separate category, it does these unfriendly gestures. And kind of, how do we deal with that, So right. I think outright attack, I don't think there is the capacity, and I don't think there is the need that they feel. Ukraine is a different thing, whatever the kind of the Russian, some Russian policymakers say, about our kind of lack of statehood, that the kind of the territories were a gift to, a gift to Kazakhs from, or discrimination of Russians, which is completely false, right? Whatever they say, I don't think that there are kind of real incentives for Russia to open the second front, and capture parts of our land. But in terms of like doing something destructive, doing something to punish, doing something to pressure, to leverage, that cannot be excluded. And I think they are annoyed with Kazakhstan, which is, and we have quite a few of points of vulnerability. So Russia can, can do harm, right? Can incur damage.
As they did with Novorossiysk.
I don't think it was. To be honest, I don't. Yeah. You're referring to the disruptions of oil export, right? In 2022, 4 times.
What is your assessment? Yeah, it would be interesting to.
I think it was not aimed at us. I think it was aimed at the West, kind of to show them that Russia can do it, disruptive the flow. So yes, I don't think it was kind of to punish Kazakhstan, as media sources claimed. Personally, that's not what I think. But definitely they can, if they want to do things, they can do things. Now that it seems that we reached some kind of agreement, because we didn't see these kind of disruptions for some time. So some arrangement there is in place, and Kazakhstan signed some agreements with Germany to send more oil there via not the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, but the Druzhba pipeline. Yeah. But how sustainable it is, and kind of, it's not very predictable, the situation. That's why Kazakhstan is trying to find alternatives. But realistically, realistically, we don't have an alternative, because 90%, pretty much almost 90%, I think, of our oil goes via Russia.
Right.
These are big volumes. Where do you send them if Russia blocks the export? But it doesn't seem.
Nargis, why do you think Russia allows even Kazakh oil?
It's business. It's business.
You're paying money for that, right?
Yeah. I'm sure. I don't know the details, but of course there are transit fees, and then I don't know what happens to the pipelines if you don't use them.
What is the oil export of Kazakhstan to China, and slowly moving to China from Russia? To China question.
So well, if almost 90% goes via Russia, and then China is the second kind of the second direction. So I don't know the exact numbers, but it should be, I guess, within the kind of around 10% probably. But you would need to. So it's incomparable to what we send to European markets, but it's still it's a chunk, and it's a very kind of economically it's important, but kind of maybe geopolitically it's even more important. It's one of these kind of strategic connections of Kazakhstan with China, and the role of China in the aftermath of February 2022 is kind of has grown considerably. It was already a very important neighbor, strategic partner, and source of opportunities and whatnot. But now it's also seen as a protector.
In which sense exactly? In which sense exactly China is seen as a protector?
As a political protector. We don't have any guarantee, right?
Okay.
Like formal security guarantees from China. Outside of the the Budapest memorandum that China sort of joined, and but which are not guarantees, but actually assurances, and so there are no formal agreements, assurances, but politically, China's support is very important, and Central Asia is important for China, particularly Kazakhstan. It is China's strategic neighborhood. That's an area where China invested, considerably, and basically, and also Chinese government has access to Putin and has leverage. What's more important? So imagine Russia does something, tries to occupy a piece of our land. Of course, the West will raise voice, and they will go to the Security Council and whatnot. But they don't have much influence on Russia, right? Given the split. But President Xi has direct access. So does President Erdogan, right? And they I think they've been signaling their interest in the region and in the security and stability and the sovereignty, right? That's a bit that you have in all the declarations and made by the Chinese and Central Asian leaders. So it's sort of the political protector now. It's becoming a political protector of the region. which is, I think a very interesting development. We already had this kind of geopolitical shift underway that, kind of Russia was a power in decline and China was like a rising power, and China's role and presence in the region, has been growing exponentially. But in February, kind of there was this kind of shift in the perceptions of these regional powers, what these regional powers can do, so, right? And China is seen as this kind of responsible, predictable regional power.
Right. I wonder, Nargis, this is very interesting. I wonder I'm trying to remember what was China's reaction to January events in Kazakhstan. How did they actually react to this? If you can tell us.
Beijing usually doesn't have like strong reactions to things. They prefer to do things quietly and also wait and see. From what I remember, they did offer help, but basically the situation resolved itself, very quickly, right?
Right.
Within days, and there were reports that it was China who helped kind of push Russia to remove the troops fast, and so.
Was it credible? Because this was the context. Was it credible, those allegations that China was kind of behind this?
I don't know, but I think that there was not much need for that, to be honest, because these things happened in January.
Yes.
And in February we already had the invasion, right? So they were clearly preparing for the invasion, and the troops that went to Kazakhstan. These were actually the troops that went to Ukraine, right? So I think they were sent, that Moscow decided to send them because they knew they wouldn't get bogged in Kazakhstan. There will be a quick operation. They'll show the flag, right? And CSTO will get this credibility boost as an effective,
Right.
that helps its member in need. But basically, in Kazakhstan, wasn't the shortage of kind of capacity, right? It was more kind of a split, right? When the law enforcement bodies didn't know whom to follow, right? Whom they should obey, because there was a kind of a split inside the kind of at the top. So they didn't know whose orders to follow, and the kind of, it was not so much even the CSTO troops coming, but more like the decision to send these troops that played a role and served as a kind of as a signal who is the true leader, and who Moscow supports, right? By the time they arrived, it was already going down, and the problem was that they left, right? The armed forces and the police, and kind of they left Almaty, right, basically, right, and they let the mob do damage. So I don't know. I'm still puzzled by the timing of all these events, but given how close it was to the invasion, I don't think the plan was to keep them there.
Yes. In one of your pieces in articles, you describe in a very peculiar way how Chinese authorities or Chinese state engages with Central Asian elites, authorities, governments, all sorts of different, very interesting tools. You say, like gifts and all sorts of other interesting. Can you call them like soft power tools, or what is it like? How would you describe it?
Well, it is soft. Of course, it's soft power, but probably somebody would need to write kind of to write a more inclusive, kind of develop a more inclusive concept of soft power than what Joseph Nye developed. Like,
Yeah, we don't have to stick to Joseph Nye. I think
different countries. But I agree
theory.
that it is, it is a way of exercising power through non-coercive means, right? And like using the attraction, the appeal, and so definitely. Well, Rasha, thank you for flagging that report of mine. I was looking at foreign aid and particularly grants as gifts, as gift giving. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm kind of looking at it as these elements of the construction of the social order. I'm an international relations person, but I think kind of this image of the international system as these kind of balls, billiard balls, and the kind of I don't think it's kind of gives an idea of how it really works. I think it's it's better to view at the system as a certain order, with certain hierarchies, right, with certain norms, with elements of reciprocity, and kind of we're all people, right? Like that's how humans, that's how humans work, and all systems are composed of humans basically. So these are people who are in charge of kind of decisions of the states, who shape policies, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's a very long way of saying that I think the kind of looking at this aspect, pretty small aspect of relations between China and Central Asian states, we can see a bigger picture, right? How China provides these grants, what it hopes these grants would do, and how they actually work and help to build up this kind of new hierarchy for us, right? We were, kind of operating around Russia, right? So Russia was the top dog, right? And now there is this another top dog, right? And it sort of helps to readjust to this kind of, we are readjusting to this new reality and learning to interact with this new top dog, basically. But in the text, I go like further in history, and I look at the kind of China, at the Chinese tributary state system, when kind of China was this center of the world, right? And empire, and it had relations with neighbors, and relations with neighbors kind of were formalized through the gift exchange.
Right.
That was putting the states into this Chinese hierarchy.
But you are talking about personal gifts, or gifts as you describe, like the state?
No, not personal. No. I'm not touching. No. That would be a separate kind of a separate topic. Right. No, here it's fully legitimate. These are that's not corruption. These are grants, right? This is really like helping Central Asian states, providing all kinds of assistance, building schools, building hospitals, training offices, and kind of giving vaccines and this kind of stuff. So, but what's interesting for me is, first, kind of this link to the past. So I think what you see in Chinese statecraft today, it's of course it's not the same thing that was done like centuries ago, but there are certain ways and patterns, that kind of that we can trace. I think historically, because China is, I think in general the kind of all these big powers, they have accumulated statecraft, right? Like the Americans have their their tools and their ways of seeing things, approaching things, doing things, right? Like Russia has its own kind of, we might not like it, but kind of we can define their approach, right? And China has its own, right? Of course, it's not the same as centuries ago, but certain things I think are there. And I think in the way China develops its relations with neighbors, we can kind of feel these patterns and kind of trace these patterns. It's kind of benevolent center, benevolent great power that is kind of, on the one hand, it's very much above. On the other, there is this kind of equalizing way of like gift exchange, but in that was in the past. But now, of course, it's more one directional, that the China gives gifts. But at the same time, look how Chinese leadership interacts with our leadership. Yeah, they meet all the time. They are received like the heads of smaller states. Get this super nice reception in Beijing, and Chinese top officials they visit the region, and that's very different from how like what we see in relations with the U.S. Right? Last year C5+1 already 22. So, anyways, when was this C5+1? Yeah, last year meeting with Biden of the five Central Asian presidents on the sides of the General Assembly. It was such a huge deal because it's the first time, the president meets all, kind of all Central Asian presidents, and to get access to the American president, it's such a huge deal to get an invitation to, to have a meeting at the White House. So, kind of, the hierarchy is gigantic,
Exactly.
So. And both are, but at the same time, the Americans are more democratic in a different way, So they all have what I'm kind of trying to say in a very kind of long way, finding that the Chinese leadership has this kind of set of tools, and they are part of the Chinese statecraft, and that's how they interact with the neighborhood, but not only with the neighborhood, but also you see elements of that in their relations with the with developing countries. So there is a certain kind of benevolence in the way China works with small fish, with smaller countries. Yeah,
yes.
It's different from the way it operates and interacts with countries that are on par.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not, and that policy is not restrained by political norms, values, and principles, like in case of the West, right? Or do they evoke any principles or values? Because
there are these
mentioned that they're not.
Yeah, there are political principles, and so the Chinese foreign policy officially operates on the basis of 5 principles. Yeah, like non-interference, equality, respect for sovereignty. Okay, I'm forgetting which ones, but these are political, and actually China so far has been abiding by them, and non-interfering in domestic affairs. Yeah. So unlike Russia, for example, right?
This is very interesting. Yes. Now it's
just a different.
China is not really interfering. Yeah.
It's a different set. It's not like, of course, they will, kind of they will not tell you about elections or, kind of.
They wouldn't support any opposition party or something like this. Yeah.
So far, no. Let's see what's going to happen, because the more assets they have elsewhere, I think they started thinking what they can do and cannot do. But so far, China is an orderly power. They like order.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The problem with Russia now is that it's kind of now positions itself as a spoiler.
Right.
It kind of wreaks havoc elsewhere, and then the rest is, even if it affects Russia negatively, So China is a very orderly, they put a big premium on order. Let's put it this way.
Yes.
That's why they feel so uncomfortable with Russia in this condition. We all don't know what to expect. It's a very different animal.
Thinking about generally the population, not the elites, population of Central Asian nations. Of course, I mean, culturally, there is probably more closeness to post-Soviet space, to Russia. What about China in terms of culture?
Yeah. Well, there Russia, of course, has a big advantage, right? It's not alien. China is still alien. Yeah. So it will take time kind of to get to know each other better. Although, of course, over the period of 30 years, relations strengthened, and you have a lot of business between China and Central Asian states, Central Asians, right? But kind of there is a sense that it's a different civilization, right? They are different. Although the more I was reading, for this report on gift giving, I read a bunch of anthropological studies, and I was surprised how similar we are, actually.
Right. This is what I also sensed from the article about the
how societies work. Yeah. How kind of this sense of respect and ceremony and pageantry, and is it okay if I'll tell you one story that really made me think that, okay, oh my God, we are so similar. There was a story about the Chinese woman, and she grew up in a small Chinese town, and then she went to the big town, and she was kind of quite successful, and she loved going back to her little town, but she couldn't do it as often as she wanted, because for each trip she needed to really prepare. She needed to buy gifts for everybody. And when she would be there, she would need to visit all her relatives and friends. So she would have an extremely packed schedule of lunches and dinners and
right,
and teas. Otherwise,
sounds familiar already. Sounds familiar already.
Right? It's like I thought, oh my God, that's us. Yeah, that's so Central Asian. So we do have this kind of, I think, shared cultural pedigree. I don't know how to call it, and actually we do share history, right? Like we're all under the Mongols, and I don't know, like all these connections, and I think it was during the Soviet period when we kind of got disattached from our neighbors, right? But historically, Kazakh Khans, they were traveling to Moscow, and they were traveling to the Chinese court, or St. Petersburg, and then Moscow, then St. Petersburg, but. Yeah, and they were maneuvering between Russia and China. And actually, in Kazakhstan, we like kind of remembering how Abdullah Khan was doing the multi-vector foreign policy. So it's not the first time we're doing it. We know how to manage the situation.
Well, I think this is important. This historical legacy. I think many regions and nations, they still kind of they still kind of employ this in their daily political life. Elites, they kind of tap into the historical legacy because it's, I think, for the simple reason because it's easier to. I remember this Graham Allison's this essence of decision work where he describes that, for instance, for bureaucracy, it's always easy to make decisions because they just take a previous decision about
Standard operating
similar
procedure.
issue
Yeah,
and they just apply it, like they don't
Yeah.
have to invent things. So, and in that sense, I mean, like the geography, the history, the political culture, it's already exists somewhere, and you can
Yeah, it's
just
a worldview also, right? I mean, what Russia is doing today, I mean, you can definitely trace back and kind of and kind of to understand the worldview, why they're doing this, why, kind of course, it wasn't predetermined. I don't think it would be right to say that, okay, that's how they are. And, we kind of could see it in the past, but definitely there were some parts in the past
right.
that fed into the present, right? And I think George Cannon's article about the long telegram about Russia, right?
Yes.
After the invasion, everybody was rereading it, kind of to understand what's going on. But history is very instructive, I think, and George Cannon, since we're already mentioning him, he was saying to understand international relations, one needs to know literature, to know history, kind of that would help you to understand people and these particular people in this particular region. And I think it's, maybe even more important than understanding kind of the theory of IR. I shouldn't be saying that as
Nargis, Rashad, I mean, I want to come to the topic of the middle corridor, and is this also maybe a topic or solution or one of the instruments, also maybe coming from the past, how maybe for us to use opportunities which for us are there now because of the North Corridor. The Ukraine-Russia route is basically now in deep crisis, is stopped. In the south, in the Red Sea, Suez Canal route, you have these problems with attacks of Houthis and a lot of concerns. And I also, if you remember, there was recently also a visit of the president of Kazakhstan to Azerbaijan. There is kind of excitement about the expanding of volumes of trade, go through China, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and further through Georgia and Turkey to Europe. What do you think? How is Middle Corridor seen from Kazakhstan, from Central Asia? Do you think there is a potential? Do you think that Russia sees it as a threat? Do you think that, like, how China is looking at it? Like, could you elaborate about this middle corridor topic? What is the chance there also maybe for strengthening strategic autonomy of Central Asia?
Thank you. That's okay. That's a bunch of really good questions. Well, Kazakhstan looks at the middle corridor with a lot of hope. But I don't think we can see it as a substitute for the northern route, to be honest. And northern route, it did have problems, and it is a problematic route now, right? Because Russia is under sanctions and all that. But if you look at the numbers, it bounced back, and still the kind of economically, from the economic perspective, it's better than the middle corridor. Yeah, middle corridor is difficult. It's multimodal. You have to cross multiple borders. We still don't have the best regimes. We don't have the best regulations, and but definitely the middle corridor helps to lessen the dependence on Russia. Yeah, that's one thing. And second, it helps to build these partnerships with Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, Europeans, that we need. Yeah. So it's not just a question of kind of having it's not just an economic project. It's much more. Yeah, it's not just a transportation thing, right? It's much more than that. That's why so much attention is paid to it, and that's why kind of the efforts they increase to push the project, and in the new kind of geopolitical geoeconomic environment. And I think it's great. I think it's really something that I think it's good that it got the boost. Of course, the war is a horrible thing, but I think it's sending us in the right direction. Yeah, and it's a very interesting question whether Russia likes it or not. Yeah, because on the one hand, yes, it is a route that is bypassing Russia. It is the route that is helping to establish stronger connections, deeper partnerships between our countries, right? With the Europeans, yeah, with Turkey. But at the same time, if they think rationally, they might actually be in favor of the project, because they do need some connectivity with the West. If they cannot do it directly, now they can do it indirectly, and that's what we see with the parallel import. Mm-hmm. They do need Chinese or European, parts, technology, things like that, right? And they cannot import directly, so they need to import via, right? Via other countries. If we have this good link, if we develop this good link with the West, it can be beneficial for them in the near future, but also in the longer term future, because I think there is understanding in Russia that the strategic alliance with China, it might not be long term. They should not put all their eggs into one basket, because they are turning into the kind of this really junior partner of China. And if you kind of read the Russian reports and some Russian experts' articles, then you can see this kind of thinking that eventually we would reconnect, yeah, with the West. It's not for life, right? We want to reconnect it on our terms, but at a certain point, the relations will get normalized. Okay. So,
Nargis, if I may ask here, because this is an interesting point, and I also hear concern, or my concern with Middle Corridor is that if things get back to normal between Russia and the West, and what would be the fate of Middle Corridor, basically? Because in terms of capacity, although there is a lot of investment right now to increase the capacity is unmatchable, of the corridor. So this is kind of, the question
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, the World Bank did a report. They recently, and they assessed the potential of the middle corridor. And they do expect a substantial increase in the volume of trade. But what I thought was interesting was that most of this increase will happen between our regions.
Inside.
Yeah, not so much Europe, China. Yeah. But between you and us, right? Or you know,
Right.
whether to I don't know if they included Turkey, but I think it was like along the corridor, and I think we need to use this window of opportunity when others are ready to invest in this. The European Union is ready to give money, and there was this very successful forum in Brussels, and around 11 billion, dollars, euro were committed to the development of the middle corridor. Well, we see that the situation with Russia will not it will last for some years. So I think we do have a window of opportunity. Yeah. I don't see normalization of relations in the near future. Okay, so we do have, I don't know how many years, but we do have some years to actually push the development of this corridor and establish these links. Now, the Trans-Caspian fiber optic cable is being built finally, although, I think Azerbaijan has been pushing it for a long time. Yeah.
Right.
At least a decade. Yeah. I think I saw 2008 or something like that when it was first proposed. So finally it's happening, Kazakhstan is thinking of, basically now putting money into development of the infrastructure of the ports, and and these are not new plans, right? But now there is there are new incentives, and there is a possibility of investments. Okay, if we pull our act together and actually can streamline, the regulations and make it like a well-functioning corridor, there will be a big breakthrough for us. Yeah, and that will help us to balance our relations with our northern neighbor, decrease vulnerabilities and have more things we can offer, and so it's quite a game, but I think we really need to think about it in terms of like a narrow window of opportunity that is there, and we need to really push it.
And that brings us to another concept you've been developing recently, this strategic autonomy.
Yeah.
Which is, I find it very interesting that you also question. I mean, I watched your discussion with Yerkin Tokomov, who I also met in Astana last year, and I mean, it was an interesting discussion about basically the necessity of strategic autonomy as well. Yeah, because he was also questioning it. But this is interesting. I mean, if you can elaborate a little bit more on this.
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in regional cooperation, because your neighborhood is your neighborhood, right? You cannot jump out of it. And if you have a well-functioning cooperative, neighborhood where you can work together and resolve your problems yourself, I think that's the best, that's the best way, right? And that's something, if you make it more ambitious, you can call strategic autonomy open strategic autonomy, right? Where you can you develop your own capacity to deal with your problems, right? And you kind of break out of the mentality of oh, we're small, we cannot do anything, and help us, and we are just the pawns in the. Okay, there is this great game. I'm not against the term great game, but I think you I think you know what I mean.
Exactly. Yes.
Certain self-sufficiency, self-reliance, certain dignity, and kind of pride in the region, So you're kind of tending your own garden, right? You don't leave it to somebody else, basically, to do it for you, and I think that's what we should do. And now, because of the situation, because of Russia, because of the war, there is an incentive to actually focus on the region, focus on working together, reduce vulnerabilities, and kind of increase coordination. And I thought that kind of we can look at other examples of successful regional cooperation integration projects. And this report, I'm looking at the European Union, but you can also look at ASEAN, and that's something we discussed a little bit in the meeting, because it's also a very interesting model. And I think we should pursue something in between. But basically, if you look at the European model, it started with the coal and steel community. So you have a nucleus, right? So you deal with the most strategic item on the agenda, right? And for Central Asia, that's water and energy. That's where we have the biggest potential for disputes and conflicts in the region, because there is less and less of water. In terms of climate change, Central Asia is among them kind of the regions that will be most affected by climate change. Yeah, we already have issues over water. So basically, the conflict potential is very considerable, and at the same time, the opportunities of doing something together, and benefiting from it are also big. And I think the water should be linked to the energy transition. We all have decarbonization plans. We all need to kind of mitigate and adapt to the climate change. And there is an increasing energy shortage in the country. We need to think of our energy security, and our grids are, they are in bad condition. You need to upgrade them. So kind of there is this situation when you need to do this big change to decarbonize, and to upgrade your electricity systems, and it's a good opportunity to rethink how you do it, and do it as a region. And if you look at the assets of the region, we have everything. We can be so nice, we can have such a nice regional system, because we have solar, we have water, we have basically hydro, we have solar, we have wind, we have natural gas, that can help to balance off the scale up of renewables. Okay, so we can build a very nice system, basically, regionally. And then we'll satisfy our own needs. And the needs are growing fast because the population is growing. Also, industrialization is underway. Yeah? So we do need more and more electricity. And now with these new plans of becoming a hub and, build more data centers, they consume so much electricity. Right? Kind of to satisfy these needs, and also to be able to even export, electricity. We need to think together to kind of to cooperate to build something together. And there are already good developments in this regard. There is a reform of the of IFS, it's International Fund for the Salvation of the Aral Sea, that is dealing with water redistribution. They put an energy kind of unit into it, and energy questions under the mandate. But also now, kind of in practical terms, we see projects, joint projects. Now Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan decided to build Kambarta-1 dam, and that's also very, very important. It's I think the first project of the kind, if I'm not mistaken, at least in recent times. So there's there are some good developments, but we need to do things faster in a more effective way, and let's see. But my one of my main arguments in this paper was that we need to approach it as a political project,
right?
The way Europeans did, and the way ASEAN also did.
Yes.
It's not just about like benefit. Yeah, it's more than that. And if we understand it's more than that, then it's easier to compromise on certain things.
This is actually what came to my mind while you were describing all these projects and integration, whether there is any idea or perspective of a political union or any suggestions, leaders proposing it. And in this context, I would like to kind of compare it to another rising new format, which is Turkic, the Organization of Turkic States, which is a very interesting animal, I would say, because it's regional, but also it's kind of based on the idea of this ethnic kinship. Yeah. So it's still kind of yet to see how it's going to evolve, what it's going to turn into. But it would be interesting to see what is the Central Asian, or Kazakh vision of this Organization of Turkic States.
Well, first on the political union of Central Asian states, it's not on the agenda, and the meetings they have, they're called consultative meetings. It's a very kind of soft term, right? I think we might eventually kind of look at the creation of an association. Yeah. But political union, I don't think it's feasible now, even kind of in a softer, looser way. It's not easy. We know that the Treaty on Good Neighborly Relations in Cholpon-Atay was signed by only 3 states out of 5, right? Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. So it's a long way,
Right.
and the reason, and there is an overlay with other organizations. And it's kind of interesting that actually, the president of Azerbaijan attended the consultative meeting in Dushanbe last year.
Right.
So it's very, very interesting development. So it's kind of it's not exclusionary, and there is kind of inclusion of Azerbaijan into the setting. And now we will have military exercises, right, without Turkmenistan, but with Azerbaijan, right, on the Caspian this summer. So they're kind of these different, somewhat different coalitions, organizations. But overall, these are kind of, soft coalitions. Maybe we can call it this way. And we need all of them.
Yes. Because the region is, in fact, I mean, of course, there is another political union, a bigger political union, which is still there, which is CIS. Yeah, and Central Asia is part of it. Eurasian Economic Union, etc., etc. But these are the unions basically dominated by former metropoly. Yeah, it's not like
but
it doesn't
CIS
provide the autonomy.
more dead than alive, CIS, and has been this way for
Yes.
for quite some time, pretty much from the beginning, right? A form of civilized divorce, and all that. Yeah. Yes, there is Eurasian Economic Union, and that's definitely serious, right? Because there are external tariffs and redistribution of fees, and then there is coordination of policies, but I think it got stalled.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when one country is under sanctions, how do you pursue economic integration if you don't want to kind of follow this country down that path, right? So, and there is CSTO. I think kind of what Central Asian states that participate in these arrangements, I think they kind of pay dues and kind of make sure things look normal. Yeah. And exercises take place and all the meetings take place and they do discuss something, they do decide something, but the main game is not there.
Right.
I think there is much more enthusiasm for the Middle Corridor, for C5, I mean 5 Central Asian states, and formats, both consultative meetings, but also with external actors, C5+1, all these interested parties, and for cooperation with Turkey countries. Definitely, Turkey is very important. Well, it's super important for you, but it's also very important for us. And I would say it's the most trusted among external powers, external actors. There are these brotherly kind of,
What is the level?
Overplayed, but it's important.
Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about the level of military cooperation between Kazakhstan and Turkey? I mean, it's growing.
It was already in good shape. It had been in good shape traditionally, yeah. And Turkey was training our officers for quite some time. There was bilateral cooperation also under the NATO Partnership for Peace umbrella, and I don't know the percentage, but if you look at the kind of at our Ministry of Defense, there are people who are trained in Russia and there are people who are trained in Turkey. Yeah. And some of the defense attaches I met are trained in Turkey, and they have a very different perception of things and worldview, and kind of, because if you went to a Russian academy and kind of socialized there, that affects you, right? That affects you. So Turkey served as a very important alternative in this regard, and there is growing cooperation now. Kazakhstan will be producing Turkish. I think it's already producing Turkish drones, but we did sign this agreement, and if I'm not mistaken, it's the first country with which Turkey signed this kind of agreement. Mm-hmm. It's a very important partnership, and now the reputation of Turkey, of course, is high, right? As a kind of a formidable power in the region, and some like as a producer of some very competitive technology, right? And Bayraktars, everybody talks about Bayraktars, right? It's a name. So, yeah. But I'm not a military expert. It's a little bit like I'm just telling you what, kind of, I think based on the on articles in general media.
Well,
Good.
Nargis, thank you so much for being guest at the new version of our show, and I hope it is first but not the last presence of yours. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Nargis.
Thank you very much. And
Always great to see you.
being the third one to join you as the co-host.
We will. We will.
Yeah,
Three
yeah.
minutes up. 3 minutes. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.